10. Sin Eater. Okay, he's not really that powerful, but he is an important part of developing the backstory of Eddie Brock that led him to be joined with his faithful symbiote. Stanley Carter was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., working in research and development when he was injected with experimental drugs to increase his strength and endurance. The downside is they also made Carter turn violent. Very violent, which led to his resignation from S.H.I.E.L.D. and causing him to eventually become a detective in New York City. Carter became obsessed with slaying anyone who sinned and abused their authority, becoming the Sin Eater. Peter Parker revealed Sin Eater's true identity as Stanley Carter, which by extension was the thing that killed Eddie Brock's journalistic career, as Brock had published articles about the Sin Eater in the Daily Globe, claiming it to be Emil Gregg. In turn, this was the cause of Brock's hatred for Peter and eventually his bonding with the alien symbiote Venom. We started off small, but Venom's villains get exponentially bigger from this point going forward, so before I go from number 10 to number 1, jump to the comments and let me know which of your favorite Venom villains you're hoping will show up in this video. Moving on to number 9, Scream. Out of all the Life Foundation symbiotes considered to be the offspring of Venom enhanced by the said Life Foundation, Scream is probably the one to do the most damage to the Lethal Protector. Using the body of Donna Diego as a host, Scream was one of the deadlier of the Life Foundation symbiotes, and funnily enough, had a similar character arc to Venom, starting out as a villain and then evolving over time and over other symbiote hosts to seek redemption and try to be a hero. While she is one of the Life Foundation symbiotes, she definitely appears to be the strongest and the most threatening and independent, leaving on her own while the others seem to be more comfortable sticking together. Number 8. Toxin. Being Venom's own grandson, making him the 1000th symbiote in the Venom lineage, Toxin is by and large one of the most powerful symbiotes other than his pappy and grandpap. His role as 1000th symbiote meant that he was destined to be powerful, a fact that Venom took into account planning to protect and guide the new symbiote from its father, Carnage, who intended to destroy the symbiote for his own psychotic reasons. Venom instead changed his mind about his grandson and intended to destroy him too. Eventually, after Eddie had lost the anti-venom symbiote, Eddie was forcibly bonded to Toxin and fought against Venom once again before having the strength to go up against Chthon. It's a little hard to decide if Toxin is a good guy or a bad guy. The symbiote is kind of both, like most of its race. It depends on its host. He is undoubtedly, though, very powerful, but young and therefore inexperienced compared to others. Number 7. Poisons. The Poisons are a species of unique aliens coming from the universe of Earth 17952. The Poisons spent a lot of time as prey for larger and stronger creatures, but that all changed when it was discovered that they had the very useful ability to assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. While hunting the Venom symbiote, the Poisons were discovered by an alternate version of Doctor Strange who had bonded to the symbiote, who had bonded to Venom. This Venom Doctor Strange proceeded to recruit an army of venomized superheroes, anti-heroes, and supervillains from across the multiverse to stop the Poisons. But I don't really know why he thought that was a good idea, because the Poisons are literally capable of taking over symbiotes, and they saw this as an opportunity to swell their ranks, something they did a very good job of doing. They are a fearsome foe and one that takes a lot of different Venoms to fight, all of which can be read in the 2017 Venomverse and Edge of Venomverse stories. Number 6. Spider-Man. Obviously, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is not a villain. Not to us, at least. But he was absolutely the first and main adversary to the Lethal Protector. He rejected the Venom symbiote after almost giving it the life it wanted. Butthurt and looking for vengeance, Venom found Eddie Brock, who had similarly been metaphorically burnt by Spider-Man, thanks to that whole Sin Eater debacle. And the two teamed up to take the web head on, becoming one of the biggest and most persistent members of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, and by extension, making Spider-Man one of Venom's #1 enemies. Their rivalry persisted through everything, and even when Venom took on a more heroic standpoint, the symbiote still appears to be hella salty about his past with Spider-Man, never truly letting it go. Their rivalry has been shown in tons of alternate stories like Spider-Man Reign and a bunch of what-ifs where Venom finally gets to successfully bond with Peter. Number 5. Grendel. The symbiote god Knull didn't just create living swords and regular normal symbiotes during his fight against the light. No, that insane dark god also created symbiote dragons, and it's about as terrifying and, admittedly, pretty awesome as it sounds. Powerful enough to kill most gods, these dragons, the main one named Grendel, were used as everything from mounts to weapons of mass destruction capable of annihilating entire civilizations. The living abyss they were made up of could also be used to smother entire planets or infect gods and mortals with parasitic symbiote offshoots, turning them, in turn, into soldiers for Knull's army. Grendel, who attacked the 6th century Danes and was defeated by Thor and was in turn frozen in ice, and most of the other symbiote dragons like the red dragon, who was called Grendel's mother, who was also defeated by Thor, destabilized and dispersed into individual symbiotes, which sought out hosts and eventually rebelled against Knull and imprisoned him in the heart of the symbiote homeworld, which they renamed Clintar, which is the symbiote's word for cage. Number 4. Carnage. The red symbiotes always seem to be the worst of the worst, and the one that would be born from Venom himself seems to be the worst of the worst of the worst. When Eddie Brock was briefly detached from the Venom symbiote, he was imprisoned, and his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, a psychotic murderer serving 11 consecutive life sentences on Rikers Island. When Venom showed up and bust Eddie out of prison, it produced its first offspring as a result of Thanos seeking the Infinity Gems out in space. This offspring would be Carnage, and it was left in the cell when Venom and Eddie escaped, bonding with Cletus Cassidy through a wound in his hand, meaning the bond they formed was on a blood level and would be nearly impossible to break. Despite that, there have been other characters that have taken on the symbiote. Norman Osborn was a notable one when he became the Red Goblin and was absolutely terrifying. And then I would be silly to not mention that the Grendel dragon that we just talked about had part of itself merge with Carnage to create an incredibly terrifying version of the symbiote known as Dark Carnage that absolutely put up a hell of a fight against Venom and others. Number 3. Bedlam. Bedlam is big, angry, red, and seems to enjoy a good fight. Like I said before, most red symbiotes seem to be just a big old pain in the bum, but this one is a king in black, and that makes him just a smidge bit more upsetting to deal with. Not only that, but Bedlam seems to be the attack dog under the orders of another much more intelligent and nefarious king in black. So far, he has shown capable of giving Eddie a run for his money, constantly beating up another king in black in a weird symbiote garden outside of time, and he has most recently used Eddie Brock's face through the symbiote hive mind to strike fear into the heart of Dylan Brock. But just like the number 1 spot, we gotta wait until we can learn more about him, as he has only recently just appeared. But before we get to number 1, it's gotta be number 2. And that number 2 is Knull. The literal eldritch god of all symbiotes, their creator, existing before the current version of the universe even came to be in the black void of nothingness. One of his very first acts after he was awoken by the light created by the formation of the universe was creating the all-black Necrosword, the very first symbiote, and using it to slice the head clean off of a Celestial. Using that head, he empowered both himself and his edgy living weapon. He would wage war against the light, becoming a legendary figure of divine terror, but eventually found himself stranded on a nameless planet after Gore the God Butcher witnessed his defeat at the hands of another god and stole his blade and unwittingly followed in his footsteps. Knull would end up trapped within the symbiote homeworld of Clintar, and when he escaped, it was definitely not a good time for anyone involved in his battle against the heroes in 2018 to 2021. And in at number 1 is Meridius. Now, forgive me for the lack of information on this one, but Meridius is an extremely new villain, being the one pulling the strings behind the events of the current Venom run. When Eddie Brock became the new King in Black, he began to play with the ability to switch from symbiote to symbiote within the symbiote hive mind, with just a thought. And then he pushed it even further, trying to see if he could move not only through space, but through time. Now this eventually leads him into contact with other Kings in Black throughout time, and to the one King in Black who is working with many not so nice characters, including Kang the Conqueror and the Life Foundation, towards some evil plot that at this current time is not fully known. What we do know is that he seems to have a control and understanding of the time stream and is using it to confuse the hell out of me, Eddie Brock, and Dylan Brock.
Number 10. Savage Alliance. While Maximum Carnage is often thought of as the first fight between Venom and Carnage, and the one used for inspiration when it comes to the film Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the truth is there were a few tussles before that story actually happened. One of my favorite involves Venom and Carnage fighting over an innocent life, a wee baby. In issue 362 of The Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man and Venom have agreed to team up to take down Carnage. Despite what the cover will make you think happens, the two do actually stick together in this initial fight against the villain prior to Maximum Carnage. Carnage does offer Venom a team-up in rebuttal in this issue though, knowing how much Eddie Brock and Venom hate Spider-Man, as that is apparently all Eddie talked about back when Cletus and him were sharing a jail cell. However, Venom refuses the offer, responding, "A tempting offer, but in this case, business before pleasure." The fight is momentarily interrupted when a banging is heard from the apartment building floor below. A woman is banging her broom on the ceiling, demanding quiet for her baby who is trying to sleep. I guess their fight is making a lot of noise, which makes a lot of sense. Carnage responds by tearing his way through the floor, taking the baby and using it to distract Venom so that he can get away. Don't worry, the baby is saved by Venom in the end, though Carnage does get away and heads to terrorize J. Jonah Jameson. Gasp. Poor Jameson. Number 9. Maximum Carnage. Maximum Carnage was a 14-part story arc that ran between multiple series including Spider-Man Unlimited, Web of Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, Just Spider-Man, and The Spectacular Spider-Man. Yeah, welcome to the 90s. If you wanted to read this story, you'd actually have to be reading all those series or find that thread that began it all back in Spider-Man Unlimited issue number 1. And then of course follow that story through the other books. This fight was probably one of the most important in terms of firmly establishing the ongoing feud between Carnage and Venom, and the reluctant team-up of Venom and Spider-Man, as well as highlighting the heroic potential Venom as a character possessed. In the end, a lot more heroes got involved, and the fight between Venom and Carnage continued through to the very end of this event in Spider-Man Unlimited issue number 2, even after Carnage was presumed dead. This also set up the ongoing trope of Carnage never really dying permanently, no matter what kind of insane injury he suffered. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Carnage and Venom fisticuffs fighting each other, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Honestly, they fought a lot. I could probably go on. I think I could do at least a part 2, if not a part 3. I feel like there's also gonna be people being like, more videos with cosplay. I'm gonna be like, look, you get it for Halloween, friends. Come for Halloween, stay for the year, come back for Halloween again, and there will be more cosplay. Number 8. Let There Be Carnage. Considering that Maximum Carnage is what lent inspiration to the makers of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, I feel like it would be a disservice to not mention the final fight between the two characters in that film. I'm gonna try to keep this point fairly vague on purpose, as I don't want to spoil the film for those who maybe haven't been to see it just yet. After all, there's a lot of really great movies out right now, so no judgment if you haven't been there yet. But what I will say is Shriek's presence adds a very interesting dynamic to the fight between these two villains, or villain and anti-hero, villain and hero I guess in this universe, I don't know. And in the end, this fight also feels quite final. In the comics, Shriek is also a character who is present in Maximum Carnage, which Let There Be Carnage is based off of. She's often known for being Cletus Cassidy's girlfriend and ally, who is almost just as deranged as he is. Shriek's sonic scream abilities mean that her interaction with both symbiotes who are sensitive to sound means that having her involved in the film and this final fight makes for a really interesting watch. All I'm gonna say about that. Number 7. Carnage Unleashed. In Carnage Unleashed, Venom and Carnage end up in one of the most 90s battles ever. Even more 90s than their original fight, also involving Spider-Man in Maximum Carnage. Because in this fight, they're going into the internet. Venom Carnage Unleashed is a story that centers around a Carnage video game being made by Extreme Violence Video Games, who turn to imprisoned Cletus Cassidy to playtest the game. In retrospect, it's a pretty bad idea, especially as we learn through this story that it is possible for Carnage to reach through the computer screen and thereby escape prison and terrify anyone connected to the internet network. In the end, this means both Venom and Carnage's physical battle also goes digital when they chase each other across the interwebs, and also across various forms of media, because apparently that's how the internet worked in the 90s. At least that's how we thought it worked in the 90s. Number 6. Venom Triumphant. This battle comes to us from Peter Parker Spider-Man issue number 10 back in 1999. There were so many Spider-Man comics in the 90s, so many different titles. Here, Venom confronts Cletus Cassidy while he's locked up. Venom believes that their offspring Carnage can do much better than Cletus and refuses to let the homicidal serial killer keep its child. Instead, it insists on taking back the symbiote offspring and eats a good amount of the Carnage symbiote in order to reclaim it. Out of love, you see. I'm like, I'm gonna eat you because I love you. I want you to be back with me. While the fight is pretty quick and only a few pages long, it's been suggested that Venom eating Carnage actually caused the Carnage symbiote to try to take control from within of Venom, which prompted Venom to act more violently moving forward from this fight. As in most fights where Venom takes on Carnage, Venom ends up triumphant this time around, but it's also a lot easier of a win for our anti-hero Venom because Carnage is, locked up. So usually those fights go on a lot longer because Carnage is pretty powerful. Number 5. Fight to kill / protect Toxin. This one is a pretty unique fight in the history of these two characters as it ended up starting out as a team-up. Well, initially it was a fight, but most team-ups, honestly, they start that way, so here Eddie and Cletus with their respective symbiotes were fighting to get Toxin, Carnage's offspring. However, both of them then realized they wanted Toxin dead just for different reasons. Venom didn't want another Carnage existing in the world, one is enough, thank you very much, and Carnage didn't want the competition, worried that their offspring would potentially surpass them. However, when Toxin was revealed to be more aligned with the side of good, and definitely not as sadistic as their parent Carnage, Venom and Carnage came to blows once more, with Venom wanting now to protect Toxin and Carnage, of course, still wanting to destroy them. Carnage was like, cool, you're good. I definitely want to destroy you. I like destroying things that are good. Number 4. Carnage USA. Carnage USA is a story arc contained in its own miniseries where Carnage takes hold of an entire town and the Avengers attempt to stop him. However, it is then revealed that it was all a trap, as the Avengers are who Carnage really wants. Carnage takes hold of the heroes, also bending them to his will, making them watch all of the horrible things that he's doing to this town. In the end, Flash Thompson's Agent Venom comes in with his own team and fights to take Carnage down, breaking his control over the town. The fight ends up actually coming down to the two symbiotes themselves versus one another, with the heroes trying to help out the Venom symbiote, and Flash versus Cletus, both of which don't actually have legs without their symbiotes, so they're basically having this fight without having any legs. In the end, the heroes, Agent Venom included, win the day, but there is still a lot the town has lost at this point. Although, to be fair, Carnage was like, I want to take over the world, and at least they prevented Carnage from doing that, so still good. Just there's a lot of people that are traumatized now. Number 3. Venomized. During the Venomized series, which was part of the Venomverse event, we saw a poison Carnage introduced. Venom ends up facing off with this version of Cletus Cassidy, who is brought back to life by the poisons at the end of issue 1 of Venomized. While Carnage is once again defeated this time around, in addition to all the invading poisons, they lose track of him and he ends up being MIA when they are taking stock of all their defeated foes. I believe from here, Cletus ends up falling to earth with his poison and the remnants of the Carnage symbiote still within him, which basically awaken to try to protect him, but all in all they all kind of get burned up as they enter Earth's atmosphere. But don't worry, even as a corpse, Cletus still has a lot of fight left in him. Also, sorry if some of that didn't make sense. I haven't actually read all of Venomverse, so I'm trying to understand it a little bit from like the outside in because I've only read parts. So please forgive me. Venomverse is wonky. Not in a bad way, just in a comic book way. Number 2. Absolute Carnage. Absolute Carnage was an epic summer event and battle that I would say was a big, if not the big, high point of Donny Cates's run on Venom. Here Carnage returned after literally being burned up as he fell to Earth from outer space, both the symbiote and Cletus Cassidy. However, the cult of Knull got their hands on Cletus's remains and used them in a ritual to breathe life back into him, bonding him with the Grendel symbiote to create a new Carnage and beginning the process to fully awaken Knull, the god of symbiotes, one of the biggest bads around. In Absolute Carnage, Venom fought against Carnage, teaming up with many other heroes and villains to try and stop him from collecting all the codices located within the spines of all who had ever been bonded to a symbiote. Collecting all of these within himself would allow Carnage to awaken Knull. In the end, even though Carnage was defeated, Knull still awoke because, well, all the codices still ended up being gathered and a sacrifice still ended up happening to seal that ritual, with Carnage becoming that sacrifice instead of Dylan, Eddie's son. That was the choice Venom had at the end. It was like, I'm either gonna kill your son or you're gonna kill me, but either way, Knull wakes up, so either way, I win. It's a lose-lose situation for Venom there. Number 1, future fight. It isn't here yet, and if it's up to Flash, it will never happen, but it seems pretty inevitable that Carnage and Venom will fight again in the future. Oh, did you think he was gone after Absolute Carnage? Never. He's never gone. He never dies permanently. Have you learned nothing from this list? Come on. This is a guy that's been blown up, been burned up, basically been like ripped apart, and anytime he seems to die, he comes back. So you can't get rid of him. Even if you rip him to pieces, he'll still be like, I'm good, I'm here. Even after Carnage's defeat in Absolute Carnage, where he was technically bonded with the reanimated corpse of Cletus Cassidy, Carnage still managed to survive his death at the hands of Eddie Brock's Venom. Carnage is currently plotting from within the hive mind, planning on overthrowing Eddie, who has become the new King in Black, after also defeating Knull in the King in Black event. Flash, however, is trying to put together his own symbiote army to stop Carnage before he can get to Eddie, but like I said, I think we all know where this is really headed. If this list has taught us anything, it's that Venom and Carnage will always fight. And Venom pretty much will always win, except in Absolute Carnage, Carnage did kinda win even though he died.
Number 10, the jury. When there was a mass breakout from the vault, General Owen Taylor's son, Hugh, was tragically killed by Venom. So Taylor and his other son, Max, were out for some sweet revenge. Now, some other hotheads eventually got involved, and eventually they were called the jury. They kidnapped Spider-Man and tried him for bringing the symbiote to Earth in the first place. They were pretty official. The jury would be awesome in the MCU because when the jury lost their support staff and funding, they were all hired by Edwin Cord, which is an enemy of Iron Man's. Now, at the same time, US Agent was hired to be the team's leader. The jury wears modified guardsman armor, with each member rocking a cool weapon. In Thunderbolt issue 23, we see Sentry, Bomb Blast, Firearm, Ramshot, and Whisper on the team. We're getting Armor Wars in the MCU, so never say never. If Venom comes to the MCU, US Agent would totally get involved. He's already on the naughty list. Number 9, Pyre. First appearing in Venom Funeral Pyre issue 1, Gray Russell was a young journalist who discovered his dying father was working for Hydra. Oof, big oof on that one. So Gray went to an abandoned Hydra base to get more info on his father, or really any info in general. And when he got there, a gang had taken over the land. So Gray hired 2 guys to go in and attack a lone member of this gang, and then Gray came in and then saved them, you know, the classic. He saved them, they accepted him into their ranks, all was going well, but when it came to initiation time, Gray had to take part in a drive-by shooting. These guys were the real deal. The Punisher then came in, obviously, and then everything got quite messy. But while that popped off, Gray was able to run back to the lab where the Super Soldier program was left. Gray entered a chamber, clicked some buttons, and then turned himself into Pyre. And before we continue on with this list, you already know the drill. Go give us a thumbs up if you're loving this nerdy content. And also give us a thumbs up just because, you know, we're having a good time. Number 8, Virus. Matt Gargan blamed Venom for ruining his entire life. This was after Absolute Carnage. Gargan was left a paraplegic, so he got all of his money and did a supervillain gear haul. He got an old War Machine suit, vibro shock gauntlets, an old Goblin glider, and pumpkin bombs. He made this entire new suit, gave it a menacing paint job, and went after Venom, now as Virus. He ambushed Eddie and actually managed to separate him from the symbiote, while of course monologuing about his cursed past the whole time. Gargan almost took Eddie out when he was crushing his ribcage, but luckily the symbiote had his back and Gargan had to retreat. When Virus attacked again, he followed Dylan Brock to a warehouse owned by the Maker. Virus fought through the Maker's defenses and kept attacking Venom to a point where he accidentally destabilized the Maker's interdimensional portal machine, and when Venom and Dylan got sucked into it, Virus went as well. No matter where they end up, Virus wanted to end Venom, even if it's Universe 1610. Number 7, Jack-O-Lantern. First appearing in Captain America issue 396, Steve Levins was originally a villain to Cap and Spider-Man. Now he was part of the Red Skull skeleton crew, but later on, his recent origins, they're actually quite tragic. In Venom Volume 2, Jack was this troubled child who disobeyed his parents and enjoyed hurting animals, just all around not a great pupil. One Halloween, he visited the crime master who straight up kidnapped this child, but over time, Jack believed that he was his real father. It was twisted stuff. And on top of that, he was trained to be a master assassin, and to show his devotion to his new father, he took out his real parents in a brutal way. He turned them into human jack-o'-lanterns. So I'll let you paint that photo in your head for a bit. When Crime Master sent Jack to find Dr. Ekmakik, who was an expert in handling Antarctica vibranium, Flash Thompson's Agent Venom was also trying to do the same. Neither of them got their hands on this guy, but they did become enemies in the process, which, well, that's all you need really. Number 6, the Sin Eater. Great nickname, love him already. Stanley Carter entered comics way back with Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 107. As a child, Stanley was sent to live with his grandparents in the Ozarks. His father passed away at a young age and his mom was in a rehab clinic. So again, a tough upbringing. These villain stories just don't come out of nowhere, it's always a tragic start. After his grandfather got bit by a rattlesnake, Jesus, he sadly didn't make it, but there was a sin-eating ritual held for him where a masked hermit came along and then ate fruit from his dead corpse. Disgusting. So when the Sin Eater looked at Stanley, he felt a connection with him. Maybe it was the raspberries and the guts on his face. It was maybe hard to look away. I don't know. I'm gonna throw up. Weeks later, his mother returned and took him with her to New York City. Stanley grew up to become a SHIELD agent where he volunteered for an experimental drug. This drug was said to increase strength and stamina, and now this obviously didn't work, and he immediately started to go mad. He got a shotgun, a new costume, and sought out to rid the world of sins himself. SHIELD experiment gone wrong. We can never have enough of those in the MCU. Throw them in, why not? Let's do it. Number 5, the Stalkers. Making their first appearance in Venom Knights of Vengeance issue 1 back in 1994, the Stalkers are former mercenary gun runners. We have Briggs, Cass, Raiden, and Trent. Their whole thing was selling guns, but one day when they picked up these weapons from an alien ship, they themselves were infected with a techno-organic virus. A strange voice had encouraged them to pick up these weapons, and like fools, they did, and now they're a super crew with super weapons built in to their bodies. The virus took over their entire body, and eventually the Stalkers started to behave like hunters. They wanted to eliminate every human from the planet, as do most of these villains for some reason. So Venom had to take them down, of course. The final Stalker Venom had to fight was Trent, big old T Trent. He had just absorbed everything at this point and was able to take on Venom and Vengeance at the same time. That's wild. Now Venom luckily hit him with his own energy lance, but that fight was way too close for comfort. If we had him in the MCU or any of these guys, it would be a blast. Number 4, Juggernaut. Cain Marko has been one of Marvel's biggest and baddest characters since his first appearance in X-Men issue 12. Once Marko came into contact with the gem in the Lost Temple of Cyttorak, he himself obtained the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Cain was hired by Skarmour CEO Charles Evans to take care of anybody who was planning to sue his company. If you can't beat him in court, just beat him up. Alright, sure. One of those targets was Venom's love, Beck Underwood. So of course he went toe-to-toe with Cain. The pair fought for a long time, and Juggernaut was just whipping Venom around, adding to his anger, and then in turn he was getting hit right back from Venom. It got to a point where the Juggernaut just gave up and left the fight. He just abandoned his entire contract. I love it. They're bringing Deadpool over to the MCU, so hopefully Juggernaut can squeeze in as well. One can dream, right? Number 3, Scream. Making its first appearance in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, this scary looking symbiote is one of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes. Donna Diego, a Life Foundation volunteer, bonded with the symbiote and became Scream. She made a fun appearance in the Venom movie, but still, it's not the MCU. We need them in the MCU. We need web swingers. It has to happen. They need to meet Spider-Man. She helped new hosts deal with a new symbiote merging, and I imagine it's not too comfortable to have an alien race inside of your head, so she comes in handy. The coolest thing about her is that she can use her hair to fight as well, so she's pretty unique to watch in action. In the comics, she went like 20 years without actually having a proper name, which is wild to me. She didn't don the name Scream until a toy line from Toy Biz dropped the action figure in the 90s, and they just titled it Scream. So yeah, she deserves more attention. Definitely put her in the MCU as well. Number 2, Toxin. Born from Carnage, we have symbiote number 1000. Toxin first appeared in Venom vs. Carnage number 2 in 2004. Now when Carnage was giving birth to Toxin, Carnage initially wanted to destroy the spawn. But once Toxin was finally born, Carnage was too weak by the process to kill it at that point. Venom, on the other hand, wanted to raise the spawn and train it, and even named it Toxin. See, he gets a name, come on guys. New York City cop Patrick Mulligan then became the host of the symbiote. Patrick actually left his wife and kid because this thing was too unpredictable and powerful and dangerous. So Venom and Carnage saw this police officer infused with Toxin and knew that it would most likely end up becoming a hero. A hero with the abilities to shapeshift, unlimited webbing, healing factor, tracking specialties. It can even hide itself in the blood of its host, so this is a pretty dangerous hero. So they both obviously wanted to try and kill it, and of course they both failed. Toxin stands out from the rest of the symbiotes because, as I said earlier, he's spawn number 1000. Every 1000 generations, the symbiote is born with what's called genetic memory breakdown, and since he was abandoned at a young age, he never really acted like a true symbiote in the first place. During a heated battle with Venom and Carnage, Toxin was actually given a helping hand by the web-slinger himself, Spider-Man. After the unlikely duo defeated Venom and Carnage, Spider-Man encouraged him just to be better. I would love to see this unfold in the MCU. Bring over Venom, Carnage, let's bring them all over, let's party. Then we can do all these amazing relationships with Spider-Man. That's the whole point. Please, please. And finally, number 1, Knull, the god of the symbiotes himself. Here we go. Making his debut in Venom Volume 4, Issue 3. So all the way before life and creation itself, before the universe even, I'm talking way back in the day, ancient deities awaited in the darkness. Once the universe became a thing, Knull, the god of darkness, wasn't a fan of the company, and he set out to destroy the Celestials, and then he immediately went to war. So after forging the All Black, which was a sword of living darkness, and a Celestial's head, he got his ass handed to him. He figured out a new plan. He figured, you know what, maybe if I can just create symbiotes, I can manifest my own suit, and then create an army, and then go after these gods. He's recently given the Avengers a run for their money when he arrived on Earth in King in Black. If you haven't read King in Black, you must do so right after this video.